In almost every way measurable, millennials, or people who were born between 1981 and 1996, are doing worse financially than the generations that came before them. Fewer millennials own homes than their parents did at their age, they have more debt, especially student debt, and they simply aren't as wealthy. The millennials entered the workforce during the financial crisis of 2008, the worst downturn since the Great Depression. Burdened with debt, unable to accumulate wealth, and stuck in low-benefit dead-end jobs, they never gained the financial security that their parents, grandparents, or even older siblings enjoyed. They are now entering their peak earning years in the midst of an economic calamity more severe than the Great Recession, near guaranteeing that they will be the first generation in modern American history to end up poorer than their parents. It is too soon to know how the spread of business failure and unemployment crisis caused by COVID-19 is hitting different age groups, or how much income and wealth each generation is losing. It is far too soon to know how different age groups will rebound, but we do know that millennials are vulnerable. They have smaller saving accounts than prior generations. They have less money invested, they own fewer houses to refinance or rent out or sell. They make less money and are less likely to have benefits like paid sick leaves. They have hefty amounts of student loan debt to keep paying off, as well as hefty rent and child care payments that keep coming due. The oldest US millennial, born in 1981, turns 40 this year. Older members of this generation came of age during a long stretch of prosperity in 1990s, the second longest period of expansion in the US history. But since entering adulthood, they've been hit with major recessions at critical stages in their financial development. They were 27 years old when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and the Great Recession of 2008 dug in when they should have been establishing themselves in the workforce. The Great Recession led to unemployment, it caused slow wage growth, and made it harder to accumulate wealth. Then, as millennials hit the point in their careers where people traditionally move into higher paying managerial roles, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. In 2020, the US economy contracted 3.5%. Now the US economy is humming again, with sectors like retail sales and manufacturing stronger than they were before the pandemic. Stocks are at record highs and wealth is growing, especially for the wealthiest Americans. It remains to be seen whether jobs and wages will catch up. Some of the differences in wealth among the generations can be attributed to student debt. The cost of higher education grew by 7% per year through the 1980s, 1990s, and much of 2000, far faster than the overall rate of inflation, leaving millennial borrowers with an average of $33,000 in student loan debt. More millennials borrow to pay for college than the previous generations, and the loans are bigger. When baby boomers started college, the cost of higher education, adjusted for inflation, was only $10,300. While struggling to pay down their student loans, millions of younger Americans have found themselves shut out of the real estate market by housing shortages and sky-high housing prices. Millennials are forced to keep on renting, transferring wealth from young to the old. Some economists predicted that millennials would avoid buying houses after the 2008 housing market crash. They haven't, but their home ownership rates are lower than previous generations. The most basic way that the middle American households have built wealth over the years is through their homes. Millennials have been less likely to be homeowners, and the main culprit is the housing prices, which have increased, especially compared with earnings. Millennials are paying a median of $328,000 on homes. Baby boomers only had to pay $216,000 adjusted for inflation in 1989. Wages, on the other hand, have only risen 20%. In 2020, 18% of millennial renters said that they planned to rent forever. Among millennials who do plan to buy a home, 63% have no money saved for a down payment. One of the factors, of course, is that the housing market is ultra hot, thanks in part to the ultra low mortgage rates. That's great if you're a homeowner, but it's terrible if you are a renter trying to buy a home. The typical baby boomer had about $113,000 in today's dollar in wealth in 1989 when they were in their 40s. Older millennials had a net worth of just $91,000 in 2019. The millennials are also more racially diverse than the generations before them, and the pandemic has widened the inequality in the US. The unemployment rate for Black Americans has recovered slower and remains much higher than the rate of white Americans. Meanwhile, Americans of color are more likely to be employed in industries that are undergoing rapid changes with automation and e-commerce, including retail and transportation. Put it all together, and the millennials had no chance to build the kind of nest eggs that the older generations did. Going into the 2008 financial crisis, boomers had twice the assets that millennials have today. Right now, boomers have 4 times the assets and double the savings of younger adults. Millennials are now facing the second once-in-a-lifetime downturn of their short careers. The first one put them on a worse lifetime earnings trajectory and blocked them out of the asset market. The second is depleting their paychecks just as they are entering their peak earning years. There's no good news in a recession and no good news in a pandemic. For millennials, it feels like there is never any good news at all.